Oh.
You guys hear me?
Hey. Oh.
What's up, guys?
Hey, how you doing?
Good. What's going on, Doug?
I can't hear you at all for some reason. I'm not sure why.
Can you hear me, Chris?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, I can't hear you at all, Doug. All right, well, while we wait for Doug to get his technical difficulties worked out, Christian, what's your impression of the first week of the season so far?
Well, I think it's been interesting. I mean, some of the teams that I expected to do well are obviously doing well. I think it's been, there's been a lot of talk about some of the offensive numbers early on. So that sort of made the rounds. But overall, I think it just feels good to have real baseball back. I mean, it just, the spring's coming. Everybody's happy. It gives a lot of energy to people. The fan bases are all excited. So it's been living up to what it needs to for the first week, I think.
Yeah, some of the teams I thought would be good haven't turned out to be all that good. Some of the teams I thought might struggle have turned out to be pretty good so far. You got the Texas Rangers 8-2. You got the Dodgers who were 9-1. I don't know if that game's went final yet today or not.
Yep.
Aaron Judge is on pace to hit 121 home runs. No way that's going to happen, but
right.
hopefully Doug's back with us now.
Right.
Well, can you hear me now?
Yes,
we can hear you now.
There we go.
Not now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Still can't, huh?
No, we can hear you now, Doug.
You got me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So we didn't really have an intro, right? There was no intro this week?
No, there's no intro this week. It's all right, though.
Okay.
We were talking about impression of the first week of the season.
Well, I was impressed with the start that the Jays had after the shellacking in Game 1 with the home opener. They were delivered a spanking opening day, and then they came back and they were in first place, actually, 5-2. And I thought that that momentum would continue going into New York against the Mets, but they got swept. And in typical Jays fashion, they're just not offering any run support whatsoever. It's all great pitching, great starting pitching, but Vladdy in particular, you can still hear me okay?
So,
yeah.
Vladdy in particular, should be coming out with on fire, or at least, up around where the top players in the game are. And he's just not a top 10 player. He's supposed to be the marquee name at the end of the season, but he's not showing any indication of that yet. I wouldn't even rate him a top 15 player in MLB. So
he started pretty slow last season too, right? And then he turned it around after a couple months and ended up catching fire and really having a phenomenal second half of the season.
Sure, when the Blue Jays were completely out of it, and that tends to be the case with Vlad. Yeah. When the Jays are out of it, that's when he catches fire. So he'll be a good rental pickup at the trade deadline, but until then,
me and Kristen were talking last night. Vlad wants Juan Soto type money, and think anybody will give it to him?
Well, he's not a Soto type player, so I'm going to say no.
Yeah, I agree. I would be stunned if he got that amount, but I also know that the free agent market for people his age, 26 years old, it seems to be sort of the window that all teams are willing to throw, back up the Brinks truck for. It seems like once you hit like 28, 29, they're no longer willing to do that. But if you get to free agency around 25, 26, they seem to have far less qualms about offering massive contracts. So I wouldn't be shocked to see him get like $500 million, truthfully, which I think is actually overpaying for him. But I think that's around where he'll land.
Sure, he will get massively overpaid, and the numbers will probably justify that at the end of the season. But right now, let's look at the top 5 players in the game. There's no slow start. There's no slow start with the marquee names in the game. And Vladdy just year after year has this slow start, and we give him the pass. Mm-hmm. But if he wants to be mentioned alongside the greats of the game, there should be no slow start. Mm-hmm. And it's year after year. And as a Toronto fan, as a Jays fan, I'm tired of it, man. He had that great year in 2021, but there really hasn't been an indication that he deserves the accolades of the great players in the game, or that he deserves that massive deal. But you're right. It's probably going to come his way for a variety of reasons. One being his age, which you alluded to. And second, just how thin the free agent pool will be next year. Mm-hmm. There's him and there's Bichette. Well, yeah, I think I think the Jays should probably throw that number at him. But right now, I mean, it's sort of in the Jays' favor. Like the Jays kind of are in the driver's seat right now with the momentum that he has. He's not producing, so they can lowball him mid-season, and that might actually be a pretty attractive offer.
He's an interesting case because I sort of look at him similarly to Rafael Devers for the Red Sox, which is, I know I'm not wearing Red Sox stuff right now, but is my team. And I think his biggest issue is if he's going to be paid that amount of money, he needs to be the superstar all the time. He needs to be the leader. He needs to be front, taking charge of the team, lead, not just offensively, but in the clubhouse too. And that was something Devers never wanted to be, and so now that they brought in somebody like a Bregman, it allows Devers to sort of step back from that role a little bit. He struggled in that role. And I think as awesome as Vlad is as a person, and he has a great energy and stuff, I'm not convinced he's that leader that he would need to be if he's going to be paid that much money for that team, Well,
that's the piece. That's the piece that the Jays have been missing is that leader in the clubhouse. And you're right. I mean, talent is there, but he does not have – I'm going to let David in here. He really does not have that leadership.
I'm here.
Hey, David.
Gunther?
He really doesn't have that leadership piece that the Jays so desperately need. That's why they brought in Justin Turner last year, and that's why they brought in Anthony Santander this year.
Yeah.
To hopefully have that leadership piece in the clubhouse. But you're right. To pay that amount of money, eventually you should be able to see that leadership piece coming into play. And I don't know a lot about Devers' personality to say that he doesn't have it. But you're right. I think probably he doesn't have it. Does Bregman really have that piece? With the Astros, I don't know that he would have been the preeminent leader.
I'm not sure. I think they had a lot of leaders on their team, potentially. But he's always gotten rave reviews from coaches and teammates about how awesome he is in the clubhouse. And we saw it a little bit in training. He sort of stepped up and said all the right things when some other members of the team weren't necessarily saying all the right things, including Devers. He was sort of the face, and you saw him with a lot of the younger players too, Robin Anthony, Marcelo Mayer, and Christian Campbell specifically. Bregman actually traveled on the road when veterans usually don't, so he could play with them and continue to help them along their path. It's stuff like that, like the little things that you don't necessarily notice, that I think are huge for a team, especially one that's trying to bring up all this young talent like the Red Sox are.
Yeah, and it looks like that Campbell signing is a real win on both sides, for Campbell and for the Red Sox. What an electric player. What an electric impact player Campbell is proven to be. I hope he's able to continue the momentum that he's shown. I don't see any reason why he can't with that lineup.
Absolutely.
Well, let me
So
throw
far,
a
there's
trade
been a
idea
couple of
out to you guys.
What's that?
Let me throw a trade proposal out to you guys. Vlad has said time and time again he wants to be a Red Sox, and we can't wait to have him in Boston. Devers doesn't want to be a DH. I'll give you Devers. You give me Vlad straight up.
Well, I think the Jays would go for that trade. I think the Jays would go for that. If both of them produce at the level that they are right now, which is extremely low level of production, then who really wins that trade? It's
what do you think, Christian?
I love Vladdy. Rafael Devers is one of my favorite players right now. In an ideal world, I'd love to have both of them. I think in a vacuum, they're very similar players. So I think a 1-for-1 trade, if you're just purely looking at their talent standpoint, I think they're about equal. And I think Vlad being a right-hander may help balance the Red Sox lineup a little bit better. I would only do that trade if it came with a guarantee that he was going to sign an extension with us, obviously. If we would make a trade like that and then he leaves after a year, that would be absolutely brutal for the Red Sox. So
I don't see them as equal. I don't see them as equal players. I think Devers is more of a clutch player than Vladdy is. Devers is off to a slow start right now, but typically in the first month, he's already got about 20 RBIs, 20 to 30 RBIs historically in his career.
Right.
Vladdy doesn't have that. Vladdy is almost always off to a slow start. So in terms of clutch, I would take Devers over Vladdy.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious too. I mean, Vladdy hadn't had a lot of opportunity to be clutch, like in a postseason, for example, where Devers has been there more, which is a big deal. I mean, that experience matters. And I'd be curious to see what Vladdy can do,
Well, he has had some opportunity. I mean, he's had a cup of coffee in the postseason just with the wild card game, and he has played horribly in the wild card game.
Fair enough.
So he has had the opportunity to be clutch in certain situations.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen it. Bichette, on the other hand, has been. Bo has been in certain situations where the Jays really needed it. So, and that's another name that's coming up for free agency. And if the Jays aren't in the mix, then both of those guys are going to be gone by the deadline.
Yeah. Do you think the Toronto ownership and front office are going to be willing to pull the trigger on a trade there? Do you think that they're afraid of the backlash, given how loud the detractors have been regarding them not being able to sign big free agents? Similar to the Angels with Shohei Ohtani, who held him despite the fact they probably should have traded him that last season. They held him because of the backlash they could receive. Do you have any fears that Toronto would do the same thing?
Well, they've got more money than God, right? Rogers Television has the second largest budget after Steve Cohen and the Mets. Well, they'll certainly put the offer out there. It's just a matter of loyalty and whether or not they want to finish their careers in Toronto. I think Vladdy, of the two, would probably be more loyal to the Blue Jays. Bo has been open about the fact that he wants to probably leave. So regardless of what they offer, I think Bo is gone. I think with a fair offer, Vladdy probably stays. Now, You're right. He has spoken about Boston, but the only reason why he's spoken out about possibly playing for the Red Sox is because of his numbers in Boston. He plays really well in Fenway for some reason. I guess he just can really visualize himself hitting bombs over the Green Monster or something. But he definitely performs in Boston. So that's, if he's going to go anywhere, that's probably the front runner. But there is a sense of loyalty with him and the Jays, much more so than with Bichette.
Yeah. Well, and I'd also say, Bregman had a similar reason for coming to Boston. He succeeded in Boston, and he had the relationship with Alex Cora, as well as Trevor Story, which helped a lot too. But he was really pushing for Boston as a free agent once it sort of became clear that the Astros weren't willing to go where he wanted to go. And I know that Vladdy does have a relationship with Devers as well, that he's mentioned in the past as part of his connection to Boston as well. So it'll be interesting to see, should he end up in free agency and Toronto doesn't offer him what he wants. It'll be interesting to see, whether it's purely about the money or if he'll do something similar to Bregman, who didn't necessarily take the best offer he got when he went to Boston. He took the offer that felt the most right for him,
Absolutely. Yeah. And that lineup, when you look at it from top to bottom, that could be a dynasty type lineup if the pitching staff holds it together.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. And it's funny because there's not enough spots for everybody right now. You talk about, Roman Anthony and Marcel Mayer, who are down in AAA killing it already, and they look about as ready as Christian Campbell is right now to be up. And there's just no spot for them until somebody gets hurt. There's nowhere to play them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Well, actually today, Hamilton was playing second today, right?
He was, yeah.
Yeah.
But Campbell will be back at second tonight.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It's just the first end of the doubleheader.
Yep.
And Rafaela Rafaela is typically the starting center fielder, you think?
Yeah, they're going to give him a good run, especially given they extended him last year. I know he struggled last year a lot. He had showed some improvement in spring training regarding his batting stance and his pitch selection that hadn't necessarily shown up in the regular season yet. Yeah. But they're hopeful that it will. But I think, when he goes to the bench, they're going to stick Campbell most likely in center field and put Hamilton at second base is sort of Core's plan there, and let Abreu and Ref Snyder sort of do a mini platoon out in right field and keep Duran on left field most of the time.
Yeah. So we could talk briefly about
almost the lineup I would go with.
You wouldn't go with that lineup?
Yeah. I would keep Campbell at second, put Duran in center, and put Anthony in left field.
Yeah, what is he doing in AAA? What's behind that? Because Anthony seems to be raking and he's ready, right?
I'm going to say, now the Red Sox won't say this, and Christian might have a bit more connections than I do. I think the reason they sent Mayer and Anthony down to AAA has to do with the June 1st deadline, as far as what year counts or what year doesn't count. If you bring them up after that, the year doesn't count.
Right.
Yeah, it depends, too, because they've got the incentive to call, especially Anthony, I think, up, because if he gets in that Rookie of the Year conversation, they can get an extra draft pick out of that. Truthfully, part of the problem is, like I said before, there's literally just no spot. I don't think they're willing to give up on Rafaela yet or make him a utility. And I think part of that comes from, Cora talked about it last year, but they had some concerns that Rafaela was struggling in part because they were moving him around so much and he didn't have a consistent spot. He was trying to learn multiple positions while also trying to learn big league pitching, which was why they wanted to stick him in center field and keep him there this season to try to give him a chance to, have one spot and learn that spot. As far as Mayer, part of it is also, people forget, but he got called up to AAA last year, but he ended up getting hurt. So he hasn't actually played a single game in AAA until the beginning of this year. So I think for him, it was more about just a little bit more seasoning at AAA before they wanted to give him a chance in the big leagues.
Yeah.
So. Well, just what else surprised you guys about week one?
Well, what surprised me was just the way the standings shaped up. Well, at the start of the weekend, the Blue Jays were in first, right? But I've already spoken about that. And it looks like they're back into their normal patterns of 0 run support with excellent starting pitching. Bassett threw another gem last night. Bowden Francis is becoming one of the more dependable starters in the AL. And Gosman is throwing well, even though he didn't have any strikeouts in his start the other night. Barrios had an excellent second start. So 1 through 4, they're really strong. But man, they just cannot score runs. Tampa Bay, I was watching Ryan Pepio start the other day against Paul Skeens. I thought that would be a marquee pitching matchup. And it just didn't seem to be in terms of Pepio. He was all over the place, didn't have his normal control. And I found that to be surprising and disappointing because he really needs to step up and be the ace. Well, definitely right now be the ace of Tampa Bay with McClanahan out of the action. Baltimore is still below 500. They came out on fire on day one, hitting bombs or still hitting bombs, but that starting pitching is going to be a challenge probably all season long. And Gunnar Henderson is back, but they really don't need offense. I don't know how much impact that's going to have. Their pitching is a major concern, their starting pitching. Another surprise for me would be Tariq Skubal. He's had 2 really bad starts, and he does not look good. You know, I hope that there's not an injury concern there, but we'll see what happens with him. So, yeah, 2 surprises there. What about you guys?
Yeah, I'll jump in on the Baltimore comment really quickly. I think if Baltimore can't figure out that starting pitching, if some of those guys can't step up, which, you know, I don't know that they will, you know, that may be seen as the single biggest mistake in the offseason, was Baltimore's insistence on not getting themselves a bona fide ace, you know, losing Corbin Burns and not even attempting to replace that. I know they had new ownership, and I know Baltimore fans were out there and were hopeful that new ownership would mean that they'd be able to spend some money and, you know, really be players in that free agency market, and they absolutely were not. And I think a team like that has so much potential, you've got to support them, and that they just didn't do that this offseason. You can only win so many games, 10-7. You know, you've got, at some point, you've got to pitch sometimes. And, you know, I haven't seen that from them. But I would say, as far as my biggest surprises, I have one on each end. I would say my biggest surprise as a disappointment has been the Atlanta Braves to start the season. They started 0-7, and it was just brutal. They have such good pitching potential there, but they lost in brutal ways. Walk-offs, had leads all the time, and they blew last second. You know, granted, they played some good teams. You know, I know they played the Phillies, and they obviously played the Dodgers, who are phenomenal. You know, so that does play a part in the record. But just, you know, if they're going to be able to compete with the big dogs in the NL, they've got to do better than what they showed in the beginning of the week. And I thought they could, but they seemed overmatched, you know, and just not able to close it out when they needed to. And then on the flip side, the San Diego Padres have really surprised me on the positive end. You know, for a while, they were keeping right up with the Dodgers. You know, they were undefeated right with the Dodgers. And I think, you know, there was a lot being said this offseason about their ownership issues and sort of the fight that's going on between the owners and the ownership group, and sort of them having no money to spend and having to try to cut more. And, you know, they didn't sign a single player, I think, until it was January, I believe it was. And it was catcher Elias Diaz was the first signing they made. They made a few during the a few pitching additions during spring training that helped a bit. But, you know, I think they were expected to take a step back this year, given some of the other stuff that was going on with them and not being able to replace some of their better players. And they really haven't looked like they've missed a beat. You know, they've been doing really awesome. And so that sort of surprised me on the flip side of it, you know, that they're really holding their own in that National League. And I think they could be the team that pushes the Dodgers again in that league the way they were last year. So,
Well, for me,
Mhm.
I'm surprised how good the Yankees are.
Sorry, guys. I'm just trying to change the.
We had talked about before the season started. I thought the
Yep.
Yankees were going to fall off without Stanton and Cole, but they're doing pretty good. The Rangers are a pleasant surprise. They're 8-2. I think they're the best team in the American League. I'm really disappointed in the Braves, though, and also I'm kind of shocked the Dodgers aren't still undefeated.
Yeah. What about Jurickson Profar? What a surprise there, right?
He's looked surprising to say is the right word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's tough. He's somebody that I've rooted for a long time that had never really lived up to his expectation, but he just seemed like such a fun, good kid, that I found myself rooting for him. And so when I saw him finally, being successful last year in San Diego, it was like, I was cheering for him. I was celebrating for him. And he was able to get his little payday this offseason, and then to have all this come out. And I think the Braves had an idea. I know the very late signing of Alex Verdugo sort of caught some people by surprise. I think my guess, and I mean, I don't know. I don't have any, inside information or anything, but my guess is that they had an idea that this was going to come out, and they grabbed Verdugo as insurance before it actually got announced. But that's tough. That's a tough loss.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Verdugo, being a Red Sox fan, as I know Christian is, and Doug seems to watch everybody, Alex Verdugo's a head case. I think that's the reason he didn't get signed until late. He got benched several times last year because he wanted to hustle to first base.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get our. I got our logo finally behind us here instead of the ringside rants. But the drop down here, I'm trying to get it for the Dirty Leather Baseball Show, and it just will not click over. It's just staying on ringside rant. But be that as it may, I guess we'll continue the conversation. Yeah. So we're looking at the power rankings for the article that I wrote, 1 through 15. I've got at the top of the rankings the Red Sox, which we've already talked about. I was thinking about today just the gap between the big money teams and the ones that just do not have money at all. It's so large right now. It really is. There's just no chance of a surprise team such as the Pirates or the White Sox or the Angels making a run and elevating themselves from the basement. It just seems like it's an impossible scenario. So their fan base is just being made to suffer. I mean, like you said, Will, I'll watch anybody. So even if my team is suffering, I'm going to watch them, right? Because I just love watching baseball. I love analyzing it and talking about it. But as a fair weather fan, so to speak, which I'd say represents over half of any team's fan base, they're just not going to show up. They're just going to completely engage with a good 25, 30% of the teams in MLB, right? That just don't seem to have a chance. And the gap seems to be getting larger and larger. Similar, dare I say, to the NBA. Not quite like the NBA just yet, but it is getting there. I don't know if you guys have any comments on that.
Well, there's an easy solution. The players will fight it, and they will probably end up in a long, lengthy lockout, but there's an easy solution. There needs to be a hard ceiling and a hard floor. You can't spend less than this, but you can't spend more than this. Except to retain your own players.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, that's always been the talk, right? For a long time is that baseball needs to institute that. And like Will alluded to, the players have been the ones that have fought back mainly because, they're afraid that it's going to hurt their salaries, is that the players won't make as much money. And obviously they don't want to give that up. I think, what's interesting, if you look at the teams that were the quote unquote underdogs in the playoffs last year, right? Especially in the National League, it was the San Diego Padres and the New York Mets, right? Were the two quote unquote underdogs. The Mets
Mhm.
had an over $300 million payroll, and the Padres, had that bonanza where they went crazy with players and extending them, so they were certainly not small market teams that were playing as the quote unquote underdogs, and I think that says something right there.
Yeah.
But I also think, some of this, we just have to, we've gotten so used to, maybe as a sports culture, accepting owners just claiming that they don't have the money to spend. Um, and I really don't think they should be allowed to do that. I think we need to put more pressure on them, because every team, yeah, obviously New York is a bigger market. Obviously Los Angeles is a bigger market. Obviously Boston's a bigger market. They're going to have more money, right? But even the small market teams, they are making millions upon millions of dollars every season. They are not losing money the way they want people to believe, between the TV market deals that they're getting, other factors, merchandise and everything that they don't factor into some of the numbers, that just, they are making money, and they cry poor, and they claim that they aren't making money, and then everybody says, oh, the Pirates can't spend as much as everybody else, and they probably can't spend 300 million. That would be fair. But could they spend 150 million, 160 million? Yeah, they absolutely could, and they'd still be making money, and I think that
Fair enough,
we really
but
need to push as fans,
yeah, but there is substance to the thought that if a team loses year after year after year and the fans don't show up, yes, they're still making money, but if there's no way that they're going to compete, there is the risk of relocation, right? Because if an offer comes in to buy the team that exceeds, the revenue that they're bringing in, most people are going to just jump at that opportunity, I would think. I mean, look at Oakland now. Like, they just completely sold out their fan base, right?
Oh, and Tampa
They
Bay's
could have
going that road too. So
They are. So, and Tampa Bay's a reasonably good team, right? They were in the World Series in 2020. Oakland, they've got a team. They were trying to compete.
Yeah.
But they've had a few losing seasons, consecutively. This move now sort of indicates that they're moving in the right direction. But the fact remains, if a team loses year after year after year, like, that's the red flags start to go off, and there's a legitimate risk that the team could be sold.
Yeah.
And that the team could not only could be sold, but that the team could completely relocate.
Well, which came first, the chicken or the egg, too? It's like, is the team constantly losing the reason why the owners won't spend? Or is the owners not spending the reason the team keeps losing? You know what I mean? And my argument would be it's the latter. I think any team has the ability to compete, if they're willing to spend a little bit. I don't think you have to be the Dodgers every year to be able to be at least competitive. I think you can sit around that $150 million mark. Look at a team like the Cleveland Indians that typically sits around 130, 140 million for their salary, and they're in it in their division year in and year out. Same with the Minnesota Twins. They're not spending oodles of money, but they're spending enough. They're supplementing, and they build a strong farm system to fill out the rest of the gaps. And that's how Tampa Bay's been competitive. But they also can't draw fans, no matter. Even in the World Series, they were struggling to draw fans in. So
yeah.
Well, another topic about fans, and we were going to talk with this with our other co-host. I'm not sure what happened to him. Hopefully everything's okay. It's becoming too hard to watch baseball. You have to have MLB, you have to have Peacock, you have to have Apple TV, and even then there's some games you can't watch. So we're losing a whole generation of fans because they don't want to pay for 3, 4, 5 different streaming apps. Manfred's fixed a lot of stuff. He's not the most popular commissioner, but most of the things he does work out. He needs to figure out a way for there to be one streaming service with no blackouts, and that's it.
Yeah, it is frustrating for sure. I thought I had all the cable services figured out, and the streaming services figured out. I got Apple TV, and still I got blacked out for a game. What was it? Yesterday's game against the Mets that I really wanted to see. It's those unexpected disappointments of trying to tune into a game and realizing you don't have that streaming service.
I can
So
tell you
it
how
is.
to fix that after the show, Doug.
Oh, I have buddies who can probably give me a few tips as well.
Yeah.
But it's annoying. It really is annoying.
Oh, it
You
is.
should have one package, and that should enable you to see all the games that you want to see. But it's just not happening that way. And
Yeah.
I guess all these services are making money. Otherwise, they wouldn't be streaming it. But it is kind of it's strange. It's strange. The other major sports don't do that nearly to the same extent that MLB does.
Yeah. Well, we've seen the NFL start moving toward that model too a bit. With you've got games literally. You got Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Almost the entire week is taken up based through either Apple TV or Netflix or this or that. So they've been moving that too. It seems like streaming is where the money is, and with sports, they're gonna jump where the money is. I think Manfred's biggest issue towards moving towards a more streamlined system is going to be the big market teams that own their own networks. Teams like the Red Sox and the Yankees that have ownership of their network, Nesson and SNY, for example. Because
same with the Jays. The Jays are same thing with the Jays.
Yep.
And Rogers has the monopoly of all cable in Canada, essentially. So
because how are you going to convince those owners to give up their networks that are making them so much money? We saw Manfred start talking about some of the streamlining last year with the Diamond Bali networks going bankrupt, and sort of he was trying to take over all the teams that were under that umbrella and sort of try to take it under MLB's infrastructure, which he claims exists, and he claims he has the capacity to take all 30 teams right now under the umbrella if he could get the owners on board. But it seems like many of the owners aren't going to be willing to get on board. And if you only end up with half the teams under that umbrella, is that any better than, I don't know. You really have to get you have to figure out a way to prove to these teams that it's financially advantageous for them. Because at the end of the day, the owners are all about money, for better or worse, and they need to be proven that it's going to make them money. And so he needs to show that. So.
And also in regards to that, and I know Christian just got MLB at bat this week. You're welcome, buddy.
Yeah, thank you, buddy.
Opening day, the app didn't work.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Opening
so
day,
I heard
MLB
that
at bat was down.
I heard that the new MLB, correct me if I'm wrong, but you can create like the whole journey to the show from high school all the way up. Have you figured that out? Like how to do that?
Yes, I'm actually in the process of that right now. I'm in my second year of college on the game.
There you go.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
That really is. So, yeah. Okay, so what, you start in high school? There's actually high school ball that you're playing on MLB? Or...
Yeah, you're playing as a made-up high school ball. It might actually exist. It's out in California, so I'd never heard of it before. And you got to do certain things, and then you get recruited, and then you got to do more things and get a scholarship offer.
Right. So it is like Perfect Game involved in the process?
Yeah.
Perfect Game is involved?
No, you don't have to play a perfect game.
Okay.
But
No,
it's
like
fun.
the company Perfect Game is a recruiting profile that every prospect has to basically register with, and they put all their metrics on there, and they'll post videos of themselves on there. That's like the recruiting platform. I was wondering if that platform had any connection to MLB, the show.
No, not as far as I'm aware, no.
Okay. Still, that's really cool stuff. I mean, I'm not much of a video game guy. I'll play Smash Bros with my son, but that's about the extent of it. I do have MLB The Show 2021, I think, but I've yet to master it. Anyway, I wanted to get into one of the pieces we were gonna talk about today was the early award favorites. Maybe we can talk about possible MVPs. And then if we have time, I was thinking Rookie of the Year as well. What do you guys think? I was going to go, all right, I'll go first.
Has to be Christian Campbell.
Well, yeah, how about we start with, I think so too, but how about we start with MVP. So AL, how can you not go with Judge, right? I mean, he seems just the perennial MVP. If he stays healthy, he will hit 55 home runs or some ridiculous number. And when that happens, how do you not give the MVP to someone who does that? And no one else does that. No one else is going to come close in the AL. So
let me throw out a dark horse.
yeah, so a dark horse. Well, I got to go with Bobby Witt Jr. Right?
I'm going to go with the dark horse,
So
Wyatt
who-
Langford of the Rangers.
Yeah, I guess Bobby Witt Jr. isn't really a dark horse. Wyatt Langford, yeah, that's a good dark horse. Gunnar Henderson, I suppose. Not really a dark horse either.
Yeah.
MVP in the National League, I'm going to go Kyle Tucker. He's on fire right now. Probably the best player in MLB, really. Does it all. And in Wrigley, I think the sky's the limit in terms of his potential. So I think he's really going to shine with the Cubs. Yeah, could be a mainstay in Wrigley Field for the rest of his career, potentially. So those are my picks. And then a dark horse in the NL. I'll go Mark Vientos. Mark Vientos, the Mets. Maybe he can have a 40 home run season with that lineup. All right. Anybody else want to throw their picks in?
For my American League MVP, I'm going to go Judge. How could you not? He's on pace to hit 121 home runs. Now, anybody who watches baseball knows there's no way he gets anywhere near 121. Wyatt Langford. I'm going to say the rookie Christian Campbell, if he keeps playing at the pace he's at, will get some MVP votes. In the National League, I'm going to go with, and I'm going to get called the most shocking MVP pick of all time. Shohei Ohtani would be my National League MVP candidate, followed by Soto.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of took a lot of my thunder there, buddy. Yeah, no, for Judge, I mean, Judge is the clear favorite in the AL. I mean, I just don't think that there's really anybody else that could come up close to that. You know, it's him against the field, and I would probably pick him against anybody else in the field. If I was gonna go dark horse, I'd say somebody to watch would be Julio Rodriguez, who struggled for Seattle last year. But if Seattle is gonna make any noise at all this season, they need offense, and it's gonna have to come from him. You know, he is the star offensively on that team. So if Seattle's able to make some noise, it's going to be because their offense is able to perform better than they were last year, and that's going to be driven by Julio Rodriguez. So I think that he would be the dark horse for me in the AL.
He had a really, really disappointing season last year from him,
He did.
Yeah.
But we'll see if he can bounce back. And then National League, Ohtani would have been my pick. I just, you know, same with Judge. That's what he does is so special that it's hard to pick against him. Just because, especially once you start pitching again, I mean, you know, it's hard to see anybody else keeping up with that. Ellie De La Cruz would be my dark horse pick there. Although I don't know if he's much of a dark horse, but I think, you know, in a similar vein to Julio Rodriguez, I think if the Reds were ever to go anywhere this season, it's going to be off the back of Ellie. So I'd put him as my dark horse there.
Yeah, that division is kind of open, the NL Central. So the Reds could make a run for it. They've improved in the pitching department. So, yeah, very possible that they can come out of the Central.
Yeah. And don't underestimate Terry Francona either, being the hire. That might have been one of the best off-season moves for any team, was bringing in Francona there, because he's a brilliant manager. So.
Absolutely. But it's fair to say only one team is coming out of the Central, right? And that's the division winner.
Absolutely.
And that's probably the case in both leagues. Wouldn't you guys agree?
Yes.
Yeah.
Something to keep an eye on revolving the Reds. Francona's only had to miss the game because he went to the hospital. I believe it was yesterday. Yeah. So I wonder if he didn't come back too soon.
Yeah, I that is a concern for sure, you know. But.
Yeah. All right, and then Rookie of the Year, AL. So we all are kind of in agreement that Christian Christian Walker. Yeah. What am I saying? Christian Walker. Christian Walker is not a rookie. Christian Campbell.
Yeah.
Christian Campbell, of course.
Yeah.
There's a dark horse for MVP is Christian Walker. But yeah, rookie of the year, Christian Campbell.
Yeah.
How can you not have him at the top of the list? Seems to have all the tools. I'm surprised he's so great in the power department so far. I didn't realize that he hit bombs. I thought he was just a speedster.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting with him too because his swing is so unorthodox, I guess is the way I'll word it. I was gonna say ugly, but it's unorthodox, but he makes it work, and they worked hard with him last year in the minor leagues to find out a way to get that swing to produce, and it's clearly paying dividends for him as his meteoric rise last year caught everybody by surprise, and he just continued that already in the major leagues, I mean, it's interesting to point that out, and as we have kids, watching baseball, and growing up and being told they have to have this perfect swing. And I think having a role model like Christian Campbell out there that does not have the perfect swing, but he still makes it work. I think that's inspirational,
You'll see a lot of unorthodox swings coming up for sure. But as long as they, attack the baseball on top of the ball and on contact, it's relatively the same. Yeah. The Jays have a player named Arjun. The Jays have a player coming up named Arjun Namala, who was their first round pick, I think in 2023. And he has a cricket background, and you'll see his swing is like a cricket batsman. He comes through the zone like a cricket player. But he's a shortstop. He's actually the first, potentially the first MLB player of Indian descent from India. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. But if you look at his swing, it really is a cricket swing through and through. But again, through the zone on contact, if you were to see an image of the bat on the ball, it's kind of the same. It's the same throughout. Right?
Exactly. And that's what I was going to say about Campbell. The ball just explodes off his bat. It really does. It's crazy, It's crazy when he does make contact. You just don't expect, the noise that he makes when he makes contact,
Well, that's one hiccup that I've had with Vladdy is I don't like his swing all that much. Similar to his dad. I mean, but how can you say that the swing is a poor swing when he's a Hall of Famer? But it's a long, loopy swing. Swing. And Vladimir Guerrero in his heyday, when he was so great with the Angels and with the Expos, had that flagrant looping swing.
He did.
And Vladdy Jr. doesn't have it to the same extent, but he still has it. And you wonder how a guy like that can be successful in the major leagues, but I guess it's bat speed and hand-eye coordination, right?
Yeah.
But as a fan, go ahead.
While we're talking about batting styles, Tyler, I promise you we'd get this worked into every show. Why don't we talk about getting better nerds in the torpedo bat? Thanks, Tyler. Tyler came up with the saying, get better nerds.
Yeah.
What about those torpedo bats?
Well, I don't know a lot about it, but is it a composite bat? Is it a composite bat or is it a wood bat?
It's a wood bat. They just moved to the thicker part of the bat.
Yeah, so basically the idea behind the development of them is that you're trying to put the most weight where the best barrel would be, so it makes the loudest contact, the most physical contact. And I guess I would just put out there that I'm not convinced that the concerns that people are having about those bats, the fact that, oh my God, they're going to ruin baseball, all of a sudden the Yankees are hitting 5,000 home runs because they're using these bats. I think it's a little overblown, quite frankly, because people weren't talking about it last playoff season, but the Yankees were using those bats in the playoffs as well.
Right.
And nobody talked about it.
The batting practice that Nestor Cortez was serving up in that opening series played into it more than the torpedo bats, I would say.
Exactly. People associated with the torpedo bats, but it was the Brewers pitching was terrible, and a lot of the home runs they were hitting, somebody like Judge was not using the torpedo bat. He was just crushing home runs. You know what I mean?
Right.
It just they saw it. It was the very beginning of the season. They heard that the players were using these bats, and everybody ran with it. And I think over the course of the full season, you're gonna see it equal it out a lot more.
Well, they look like composite bats. Actually, when I was a kid, I was a bat boy for the Blue Jays, right? When they won the World Series. And the bats back then, they were either completely painted black or they were wood grained like the old style Louisville Slugger, right? But now the bats seem to be like two-toned, right? They're painted one way on the top and there's like a sheen or a gloss. And then on the bottom, they're painted something else. And then there's like a grip or whatever.
Right.
But they look like a composite bat. It doesn't even look like a wood bat anymore for the most part.
Yeah.
I haven't really looked at one super close. If you go to the sporting goods store, they're mostly composite bats that are being sold, right? It's like part wood, part some other material. But I guess in the major leagues, it's still strict that it has to be wood.
Yeah.
But there's so many different kinds of wood that they're using. They're using maple, they're using elm, they're using, different kinds. So,
exactly.
And another thing, Alex Bregman keeps trying him out in batting practice, and he must not like it because he's yet to use it in a game.
Yeah, that is interesting to me too. I know I kept hearing he was going to be using them, and then he keeps not using them. So I don't know what's going on with that. I've also heard a rumor, that perhaps, given the lack of offense that was happening last season, that it's possible the MLB has also tried to juice the balls a little bit more this year to try to get a little bit more offense back in and get more people watching.
Maybe.
I don't know how true that is either, but that's a factor I've heard people saying could be as much of a factor as anything with the bats are too. So
yeah, who knows? I mean, there's standards by which the balls have to be made, but it could just mean that the stitches are a little bit tighter than they were last year.
Yep.
It's just a different batch of balls.
Yep.
Who knows? There have been years in the past, like 1987 comes to mind, where just suddenly, remember that year? I don't know if you're old enough to remember, but I am. Mark McGuire came on the scene as a rookie and he hit 49 home runs.
Yep.
Andre Dawson, that was his big year with the Cubs when he won the MVP. There were guys hitting 40 plus home runs who had no, prior experience of hitting anywhere close to that. Right. Yep. So this might be one of those years.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah. And we've also heard
so far,
pitchers, pitchers have come out and said that the ball feels, not necessarily this year, but in the past, they've come out and said the ball feels different year in and year out, or even mid-season, they've said, they can feel the difference, with their grip and stuff. So I don't think it's totally far-fetched to think that the MLB, does sort of adjust things, a little bit, still within regulation, but maybe plays with a thing here or there to see, what the effect is on everything. So.
Yeah. Well, no two balls can be exactly the same, right? When you think about it, it's not like it is leather that they're using on the outside. Right. So there will be, little micro imperfections that's different on one ball from the next, right? It's not like a golf ball.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting conversation. And then there's the mud too, right? Like the umpires have to mud up the ball before the game. That could have an effect.
Absolutely.
On how slick the ball could be with the pitcher, how much rosin a pitcher uses. Exactly. There's various intangibles that go into, a game really that are different from one day to the next.
Absolutely.
So,
just a few minutes to Sunday Night Baseball. Seeing how we're on right before Sunday Night Baseball, we'd kind of be amiss if we didn't at least mention the game.
It's the Red Sox. It's the back end of the doubleheader is tonight, right?
Yep. And shout out to Hunter Dobbins. He's a rookie. He got called up today to be the 27th man, and he is going to be the starter for Sunday Night Baseball. So talk about throwing a kid right into the fire and seeing what happens, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So Campbell's going back to second for the second game.
Yeah, we're going to start 3 rookies in this game.
Where's Dobbins playing?
Dobbins is the starting pitcher. Campbell's going to start at second, and the rookie Carlos Narvaez is going to start at catcher.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't know it. Yeah, I didn't make the connection there. Dobbins is the starting pitcher. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, he's going to be starting tonight. So right on
Awesome.
Sunday Night Baseball in front of the whole country, we'll see. You know, nothing like your first start jitters. You know, Gotta step up.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah, and the
I
weather
put-
is not. How's the weather in Boston right now? Still in the
Cold and
single
dreary.
digits, right?
yeah, it's cold and dreary, but the game should get in. It's not pouring. It's not supposed to start heavily raining until tomorrow morning, so they should be
Yeah.
able to get the game in.
It's still in the 30s though, right? 30 to 40 degrees.
It's about 40. Yeah, it was the high of 50 today. Probably going to be around 45-ish or so before game time and dropping.
Yeah, that's cold. That's cold.
Yeah. Yeah. So
I put 20 on Devers to homer in the first inning.
He's
There you go.
definitely due.
yeah. Yeah.
I think Bregman's found his stroke, so I'd like him to probably hit a bomb tonight.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, Cassis has got to, start announcing his presence with a little bit more authority as well.
Yeah, he's somebody that, I mean, he's been taking some heat from Red Sox fans for a variety of different things. But this is a make or break year for him, I think. If he doesn't show anything throughout the rest of the season, start turning it around, I think he's the easiest trade candidate for the Red Sox moving forward, because they're going to need to free up spots. And I think if he doesn't prove himself, he's gone. So he really needs to
That's
step
too
up
bad.
quickly.
He seems like the quintessential cleanup hitter,
Yeah,
and
he
so
does.
much potential there. I just wish that he, well, number one, he stays healthy, and number two, that he reaches his potential. Right.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. Well, I guess there were some technical difficulties, and I apologize for that. I'm still a newbie at producing this kind of thing. We'll tighten it up for next time. But the chat, I feel, was still pretty solid.
Absolutely, I agree. Very knowledgeable group, and hopefully anybody watching enjoyed it. And like you said, yeah, we're gonna keep working out the technical difficulties and getting that smoothed out and everything. We'll have our fourth co-host next week, and we'll keep rolling from there. But this has been a great conversation. So
yeah, absolutely.
We'll see you next Sunday. Stay tuned, guys. This is just the beginning.
Take care, guys.
Cheers, guys. All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.